Today we have Lorraine Wong, and she's going to tell us a little bit about intensives, but also how team gave her confidence to be a more effective therapist. Welcome to Talking Team CBT, where you'll hear stories from therapists and clinicians around the world on their journey and experience with Team CBT. Welcome back to another episode of Talking Team CBT. And today joining us is Lorraine Wong from Menlo Park, California. And she's in private practice there. She's been doing team and in private practice since 2014-15. Welcome, Lorraine.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Really excited.
Super excited to have you. So, want to hear a little bit about your story and your journey with team. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about how and when you got involved with team?
Yeah, for sure. So way back when I was in my internship, I was still in graduate school, and here in the US, when you're in graduate school for psychology, you have an internship and a postdoc before you can practice in California. So I was on my internship in 2014, and I knew I wanted to work kind of locally in the Mountain View, North Palo Alto area. And I had heard a colleague of mine, a schoolmate of mine, had told me about this group called for Team CBT. And I hadn't heard the term Team CBT yet, but then she explained to me it was David Burns' group. And I got so excited because I did a full year practicum working at the VA, at Palo Alto VA, with homeless vets. And the whole program was based off of his book, Feeling Good. So I was like, of course, like that David Burns, I had learned, I didn't know it was called the 5 Secrets at that time, but we used his communication skills. Every client in the program had to read the book. We all practiced a model of communication and CBT. So I was like, I need to join this group. So I joined David's group back when I was in my internship in 2014. And I was very lucky because it's at Stanford, which is really close to where I live. And it's a place where I knew I wanted to practice. And the idea was to build a relationship with other therapists that were really interested in evidence-based treatment, CBT. But I've told David that, Team CBT is like CBT on steroids. Mm-hmm. And I learned that when I started the groups because there's so much structure to it. So I fell in love, and I never left. I mean, I left the group eventually because of things I needed to do, but I then ended up working at FGI in Mountain View and being in Angela Crumb's group and a lot of different groups since then.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So you had heard about David because of the work you'd done with the veterans, which was super exciting to you when you found out that that was connected to this whole new, what's this Team CBT thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And Team CBT blew me away.
That's so cool. I want to also say hello, Lorraine. It's so great to have you with us here, and I'm glad you brought up. We haven't talked so much about David's legendary group, which was at Stanford, and now pretty much online, and that's so cool. I didn't know that part of your story. That's really how you kind of enter the Team CBT world. So maybe tell us a little bit more. I know you said that it helped you really build a relationship with other therapists, and you got introduced to this notion of CBT on steroids. What else did you kind of get out of the group for the years that you spent in that group?
That's such a hard question because there's a lot of things I got out of the group besides unbelievable training. I mean, you don't get better training than you get being in one of the Team CBT groups, being held accountable and practicing skills over and over again with other therapists and learning how to fail over and over again and having a sense of humor about it, almost like failing with grace is what I would call it. So really being with lots of clinicians who are all about wanting to not only better themselves as therapists, but be the best person you could be. And I know that sounds a little hokey, but there is a camaraderie in the Team CBT community that I have never experienced through all of my after-graduate training, all the different programs or types of groups I've been in. There's something very different. So really learning how to be authentic and at the same time learning these unbelievable set of tools that I can use anywhere with any type of therapy. I'm a CBT therapist by heart, but it's the structure of team that allows you to expand methods um, to whatever is going to work with your client, and it's
Mhm.
still in an evidence-based umbrella, and that's really important to me. So I know that wasn't one thing, but
No, there's so many things, and
a
you were
lot
fortunate
of
to
things.
right to jump into that right at the beginning of your training. Some of us had to kind of unlearn a lot of the things that we had learned from our years of training, and you got to start here and have that idea of failing with grace and
Yeah,
practicing deliberate practice, and like you said, getting a toolbox that you could use in your practice. So yeah, maybe tell us a little bit more how your career has gone from there, from starting at that point.
sure. So at one point, I was still working at a hospital when I was in David's group. I did that for a couple of years, and then I had to, his group was in the evening, and I had to run a group in the evening for trauma. So I switched groups to a smaller group that was during the daytime, and that was Angela Crumb's group way back, like 2015, 16, maybe 2016 in Mountain View. And again, this is a smaller group, but I just felt even more connected and wanting more. Um, and shortly after I joined the group, Angela and I met up, and she just said, why don't you come here, come to FGI? And that's where that started. I left where I was, ended up at Feeling Good Institute in Mountain View, worked as a clinician for a couple of years, and then got pretty involved with Angela running our intensive program in Mountain View. And shortly after that, took on the role there as clinical director and also seeing clients. So that's where I've been up until just very, very recently, where I'm moving on. And even though I'll be in my private practice, I'm still going to be very connected and teaching a course through FGI and hopefully involved in other groups.
That's fantastic. For those of our listeners who don't know what intensive means, maybe tell us a little bit what intensive is and why do you love them so much?
Yeah, intensives are something that I think David created. I'm not sure if that's correct, but it is a program or a way of doing therapy where um, someone works with their intake coordinator or their therapist on specific goals that they want to work on. So we get really specific. It could be, helping managing symptoms of depression or increasing or reducing symptoms of social anxiety. Those are two I can think of off the top of my head. So we work on a program before the person even comes to treatment, of exactly what we're going to work on. And it's combined instead of your traditional 50-minute weekly session over time, we're going to do this in maybe, for example, 12 hours. And no, that's not going to all be in one day. We break it out, something that's doable for the client and for the therapist. So maybe someone will come in for 3 hours every other day, or over the course of 2 weeks, or somebody might do it 2 days in a row for 6 hours. It's very flexible, but it's kind of like school and learning skills with practice and homework in a shorter amount of time. It's like a bigger dose of therapy in a shorter amount of time with really um, with a lot of sequential practice in between. So you're really learning your skills, and you have somebody one-on-one teaching you how to do that. And we've seen over time how unbelievably powerful this can be. We also make sure that there is relapse prevention included, as well as a treatment summary, which will go back to the person's provider, or maybe you won't need therapy anymore, or you might want to do booster sessions once in a while. It's very flexible and dependent on what the person wants to work on. But it is incredibly powerful work for both the therapist and the person coming in.
One of the things you had said, when we were asking you some questions about team was team help build your confidence. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think when you learn how to be a therapist, it's not like black and white. It isn't black and white. We don't go in with, you might have a diagnosis, but sadly, we can't do this sometimes. But it's not like, oh, this is exactly what we need to do. And then the person's better. So it's a little bit more fluid and gray. But with team, I think it really helps. It provided a model for me when I get stuck or my client is stuck. There's a very complicated structure. I would call it complicated, but in a sense that there's multiple branches of a tree that I can turn to find what is the next thing I can do with this patient. So it gave me the confidence to know if something isn't working, there's something else that we can reach to. And that's one of the reasons that I was speaking about. Also, just the measures that we use, the brief mood survey, and this concept of getting evaluated by my clients has built my confidence, because I'm not a mind reader. I'm a human being like my patients or clients, and I love the idea of asking them or them being able to give me feedback so I know where I'm at. We can have a conversation about it. I feel much more relieved and confident that it's okay to make a mistake, and I think my clients love the fact that I'm human and I don't pretend to read their mind. So I just feel more at ease, if you will. And then the last thing I'll say about confidence, the plethora of methods and conceptualization is never ending. David is always creating more, as well as other team clinicians. So I always have people to turn to, amazing consultation, and peers and colleagues and mentors within the community that I can reach to when I'm stuck with someone or stuck with a client that I want help. Where can we, more ideas?
Yeah. It's so interesting as we, have these interviews more and more, seeing the same themes really emerge,
Really?
like you're saying, Lorraine. Yeah, the framework and structure that team provides, and the being able to conceptualize how we're working, and then of course follow that framework towards the using that model. So that really resonates, with us. And if I could also, turn to a little bit, you've not only done tremendous clinical work, but you've also been someone, and continue to be someone, who's one of the premier trainers, and doing a lot of that at the Feeling Good Institute. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, about the training you've done, and how you've seen this, kind of get passed on. You talk about getting trained in the Tuesday group by David and Angela and others, but now you're training new therapists, and how you're finding that progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the other really cool things that kind of branched out throughout our community that maybe wasn't on purpose. I can't imagine when David began the group and Jill Levitt was one of the premier leaders. I don't think they had this in mind that we're going to create trainers. I think we are just all people who want to continue to learn and grow. Because even though I became a trainer through the Feeling Good Institute in general, I have lots of colleagues, including Angela Poach right here, who is a trainer. And I know you're with FGI now, but there's so many other people like a Heather Clegg. I can go on and on, people outside of just the FGI organization that are trainers or trained through the
Mhm.
FGI
Mhm.
clinic. So I think that's just because we all want to learn. And when we have the skills, I think what we have all learned is through the small group training and practice. It's just not only the best way to learn, but it's fun. So as far as my personal training, somehow I can't remember exactly how. Angela is a very good salesperson. Angela Crum, she'll when you meet with her, you can ask her that look, because I always tell her this. somehow Angela has a way of convincing me to do things, and I don't even know if she's convincing me to do it. And at one point, she asked me to take over her level 3 prep training group. It was a very small group that we had in Mountain View to help train people to take the level 3. We actually have an oral exam, which I have so much respect for because it shows standardization across the board. And I said yes, not knowing what I was getting myself into. And before I knew it, then all of a sudden it was online, and then it was 20 people, then 40 people, then 80 people. I don't know how all of that happened. There's been many iterations of it, and each year I hope I continue to grow as the teacher in that course. And most people who take it, if they want to take the exam, they pass. But the cool thing about it now is a lot of people take it even if they don't want to take the exam. It's just because they want to really learn how to use the model from start to finish. And I think that's the first way people learn that. Except now we have the 12-week group as well, but this is just a little bit more advanced in that sense. As far as the team flow is what I like to call it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that group that you have, that you do, is much more focused on the flow, whereas the 12 really hones in on specific skill building, and you really kind of need it all, right? It's not, they're not in competition with each other. And I know therapists who take some of these courses more than one time because I just find it hones their skills so much. So, doing even a basics course, what we consider like a level 1 basic course. I have therapists who are level 3 who will take those again, just to really,
for sure,
to really hone in on that. And, talking about all the, professional growth and things like that, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how has TEAM affected you personally?
I have a funny story to answer about that.
It's great. We love funny stories.
This is a very funny one. Briefly, I think, but briefly, the overall way it changed me is the way I communicate. I mean, the 5 secrets has changed me profoundly as a person. I know I, can have a way of connecting with people, but with the 5 secrets, it has really, really taught me to slow down, hone in, use inquiry. The whole concept of disarming is it's such a hard thing to wrap your mind around. We all want to be right all the time. Well, I'll speak for myself. I like to be right. And when I learned how to disarm, that was the most humbling experience in my life, in my personal life. So, and it could just go on and on and on. It's made me closer with so many people. And it's just a natural way of speaking now. I don't even know I'm using it. The funny story is my husband has been listening about the 5 secrets for a gazillion years. He pretends he acts like he knows it. He doesn't. He's been on hikes with us and David, the whole thing. He just started a new job, and this job has a high level of communication with the CEO and across the company. And so all of a sudden now, he has been practicing the 5 secrets, and he's using them, and he's like, I just used disarm and it worked. So he's using it on a different level. He even said he was going to email David. So just seeing how it can impact the people I love, having them use it in their own lives is very, very meaningful.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I had my son one time, he was working for this fellow, and the fellow said, don't use any of your mom's psychological mumbo jumbo. and my son said, he goes, I didn't tell him this, but I thought, if I didn't have my mom's psycho babble mumbo jumbo, I couldn't handle this job.
Exactly. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how we all can incorporate this into our personal lives as well. So I feel like we've learned so much about you, Lorraine. Maybe let's give you a little bit of a fun question here. We'd like to ask, well, with so many methods at the end of the M part of team, there's so many, 50, maybe we have a list of even 100. What would
Yeah.
you say? I was going to ask you to give us one, but maybe give us, one or two of your favorite methods that you found to really be really powerful.
Good, because if you just said for one, I would have
That would be
really
tough.
struggled. I love devil's advocate.
Hmm.
Love devil's advocate. I work with a lot of people who have disordered eating, or even just general anxiety. And I know that that's not in the conceptualization for habit addiction, but sometimes people are habitual with their anxiety. So, what I love about devil's advocate is it's fun. We really get into it, and clients will tell me, I heard your voice on my shoulder the other day when, I was, whatever the problem was. So that's a really fun method. And it's one where people are talking actively and we're role playing. So I think there's a certain way of integrating learning when you're talking and doing things and challenging people versus writing things down. And
Hmm.
I know everyone's going to give you this answer, but I really do love externalization of voices. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
who doesn't? Those would be my two top favorite. But
Yeah,
there's
and that makes a lot of sense. And for our listeners, those are two of the really powerful role playing techniques where we're either we're talking back to our negative thoughts or negative self and externalization of voices, or in devil's advocate, I guess you would say, really kind of like talking back or seeing if we can kind of talk back to the impulses or
tempting
desires.
thoughts. Yeah,
Yeah, those tempting thoughts, exactly. So I love that those are your uh, methods, because I kind of agree that those are two of my favorites as well.
cool.
Yeah, those are really popular ones. Well, that's the fun question. The other question is, what's one aspect of team you found challenging?
Yeah, I know this probably is something you've heard from other people, but certainly learning how to do positive reframing. I know motivational interviewing. I was trained somewhat in it, so being even more paradoxical with people in a way that they can hear it and it makes sense. It's a little confusing at first, but looking at finding all of the beautiful things and helpful ways, something that's been painful for someone like anxiety or depression helps them, or what beautiful things does it say about them. At first it's something that, for me, I had to learn my own language to use that with my clients. And I also find with my clients, it depends on the client how I'm going to work with them on it. But it does make a difference, no doubt. So I don't remember if I told this on one of the podcasts I was on with David, but I had one client who struggled so deeply with hopelessness. It was painful. We spent 6 sessions
Mm,
on positive reframing on his hopelessness.
mm,
Wow.
It worked. It worked. And I think
Yeah.
part of this, he was an engineer, really, really, really bright guy. So he thinks very, very intricately. So we had to get into the nitty gritty, but it really helped him. Um, it was pretty life changing for both of us.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story, and makes us think that, I mean, to my way of thinking, I mean, there's so many wonderful ideas in team, but probably the agenda setting with the assessment of resistance is arguably the most revolutionary, in some ways most powerful. I find myself doing more and more externalization of resistance in sessions. I want to jump into the methods, but I know that I need to kind of hold back that impulse, and but it's so powerful when we do that, like as David says, we resist that desire to, or that need to help them, and because then they often step in and are able to talk back to that. So I
For
really love
sure.
that story. This has been so fantastic. I really don't want this interview to the end. I feel like we could talk to you for hours, but if we can maybe just end off with one last question, which we like to ask, which is, of all the therapists, the world we're listening, as we hope they'll start to do here, what's the one thing about team that you'd really like them to know?
So hard. Honestly, because I do know lots of different therapists from different disciplines, and I think what would be most important for people to know, it's a structure, it's an umbrella. So no matter what type of therapy you do, you can include the structure of team. Testing is super important. We always want to know how are our patients doing over time and even immediately in session. And empathy is just, if you're a therapist, you're going to want to provide empathy. The agenda setting piece you can fit into whatever's your own style, but the methods truly is your oyster, if you will. So if you're not necessarily a CBT therapist, or you're a fourth generation or third generation, I don't even know the generations anymore, whatever you are, I mean, I also can incorporate DBT into there. And a lot of, I do a lot of ACT. So even probably psychodynamic. I don't know a lot about psychodynamic, but I imagine there's more relational, and I do a ton of relational stuff with my clients. So that I still consider the team as a structure, and then you've got your methods as the umbrella. And I love that. So I would want every therapist in the world to know that.
Yeah, I think that sums it up really, is how it's this framework and keeps everything, going and continuing to move in the right direction and keeping the client at the forefront rather than any kind of methodology or particular thing that we might like. And
it's their agenda, not ours. Like
yeah.
David says, it's tools, not schools for therapy. And
Yeah.
Angela, you brought up a different point, but just that idea of like, this is rolling resistance with motivational interviewing, but more so with the agenda setting, it's like in your client's hands. We're not going to push people to do things they don't want to do. Like
Mhm.
they have agency in our therapy, and I love that. And I think my clients feel, empowered because of that. And that most clients would feel that way if they're working with a team CBT therapist.
That's what a great note to end on. Really glad you were here with us today, and looking forward to some of the trainings you're going to produce. And if anyone wants to get a hold of Lorraine, we're going to have her contact information in the description. And you can also always go to our website, talkingteamcbt.com. Thanks for joining us for another session.
Thanks to
Lorraine.
both of you so much. It was so good to see you guys, and I hope we'll be in touch soon. And thank you to the listeners. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to end the recording. And